will get started. First of all, thank you for joining. This is the first webinar I started for my webinar series about accessibility. The event will happen every month on the fourth Thursday, and it will last until October, and the last event will be in November for the DevFest. So who am I and why I'm doing the whole series? I am Julia. I'm based in Vienna, in Austria. I am a self-taught developer, and I'm also a GDE, meaning a Google Developer Expert for web technologies since the end of 2023. I am an accessibility specialist, and I write my blog posts in German, English, and Japanese. Why I am doing this webinar series, the reason for this is that I want to spare you time with struggling getting into accessibility, and also I want to provide for you that you can get to the point directly of what you're expecting from my webinar without starting over and over again with topics like what is accessibility, what kind of disabilities are out there, what is semantic HTML and such. Yeah, as I mentioned, I'm a self-taught developer. I started out in 2020 and I saw lots of videos and I read lots of articles, and after all these years, what I find, it's nice to have, but at some point it's also annoying because you kind of waste so much time on it, is that you have to go over the basics over and over again to learn something new. And also, what I think is that when you learn, for example, there's a video out there and it says, yeah, learn about semantic HTML, why it's good, why it's there. This is, of course, all true, and you should learn about semantic HTML, and you will learn about semantic HTML or ARIA and all the stuff in my webinars as well. But what I always was missing is that in my project, I was always doing, in my opinion, the right thing. What I learned, that I was using semantic HTML, for example, but then at some point when I started testing, it didn't work. And it took me quite a while to find out, why does this not work? I made it exactly as I saw in the tutorial or as I saw in the ARIA authoring practice guides and this stuff. And I think I wasted lots of time to do the research on why it's not working, because then I learned about, oh, not every browser is supporting this specific HTML element or this specific ARIA row, or not every browser combination is good or it works as I expected that it works. And I want to show you from the very beginning what you have to take a closer look when you implement certain things, instead of just saying, yeah, use semantic HTML and then you will get what you want, because that's unfortunately not always the truth. And also, I want to get in every webinar to the topic very quickly. So this is my only introduction I will do throughout the whole webinar series. Of course, when there is a guest, I will, of course, introduce them to you. But in general, this is who I am. I do not want to repeat myself on every webinar, and I also do not want to explain in every webinar. Just in case you don't know, this is accessibility, or this is what it means to use semantic HTML. I hope for you that you just rewatch all the previous recordings and webinars, so you are up to date with what I have already talked about, and that you can go straight to the point to learn something new. Because I think that we can go way faster in accessibility and improve ourselves with the topic of accessibility in the web when we just skip all the things and get started right away, and that you feel more accessibility savvy in a year than maybe in the last 3 years you have learned about. Topics that are going to be covered throughout the whole webinar series will be, yes, of course, the introduction on accessibility. So I want to start from the very beginning, so everyone is on the same boat after the year. We will talk about accessibility in design, like how can you create in Figma accessible design, or how to use annotations, how communicate in a team, the designer, the developers, the testers, how to get started with writing accessible code, and also how to advance the code, getting from semantic HTML to ARIA, and what to look out when you work also on a single page application. Also, what is the WCAG, so the Web Accessibility Guidelines, what it is and how to work yourself through it, because it's huge and mostly not understandable. But we will also work through it. I want to show you some testing tools I use regularly, which are for beginners, but also later on, if you're more advanced in writing accessible code, what you can test after that, as no matter what position you are in, if you're a developer or a tester or a designer, because you will learn very soon that I think that everyone has to learn it, and there's no such I'm a designer, that's not my part, or I'm a tester and this is not my part. Accessibility only works if the whole team works on it and is sharing knowledge in every aspect and not working on their own. And I don't care what the other person does. I'm also a very passionate about developer experience and team experience and good code quality. So you will hear that a lot, besides the accessibility part, because I think this is also a part of the whole thing. And of course, I also want to give you an introduction about people with disabilities and how they navigate the web, to also understand why we are doing this, or to better understand the people who are using the web differently than maybe you are doing. And there will also be, I guess, a session with an Ask Me Anything, where I will have 2 or 3 guests with me, where you can really ask anything about accessibility, no specific topic. As I mentioned, the dates will be from January until October. And the last event will be the DevFest in Vienna in November. This will be live. This is, of course, about the whole programming and the whole GDG program, like the Google developer groups, but there will, of course, be also topics and live talks about accessibility. So yeah, keep an eye on that. You will have the dates always on the GDG platform, also on my personal blog, Accessibility First webinar series. You can also keep yourself up to date by subscribing to the Accessibility newsletter. It will send out at least once a month with all the dates for the next month, so you will not miss it. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can text me anytime about any topic about accessibility, and also I will share when the next event is coming. And in the GDG website, you will see the events like this. So the next event is already set for the topic. And after that, it's still going to be decided, but the dates are already there until the end of October. On my personal website, Accessibility First, you will find then the event, and also, again, the link to register for the event, also how to get the slides from the presentation, and watch the recording afterwards. So you will always have access to all the presentations I make in the Drive, Google Drive I am sharing with you. And after every webinar, the presentation, there's the last slide, and then I will make the announcement for the next session, when it is, how you can register, again, find the info material. So there are links everywhere, and every webinar presentation, you will not going to miss anything. This would be it for my introduction about the whole webinar series. And now I would love to start with the webinar itself for today. Afterwards, there is a Q&A session, and I encourage you to ask anything. It does not have to be related to today's topic. I really want you to have the option that you ask anything about accessibility. And if you're not comfortable speaking English, it's also okay for me if you ask the question in German. I will translate it and explain it. And if in the queue, so use the Q&A chat. And if there's no time anymore, then I will also answer these questions on LinkedIn and also on my blog. Well, yes, then let's get started with today's topic, getting started with designing for web accessibility. What we're going to cover today is a short introduction of what a web accessibility is, and also what user experience is, what is accessibility in UX design, and we go over some key concepts, which will be the visual key concepts containing color contrast, color independency, and typography. And another key concept would be comprehension on the example of descriptive links. So what is accessibility? I assume that you already saw this short form of the word accessibility, A11Y, and the 11 stands for the 11 letters between the A and the Y. You can see this as an abbreviation within the text, or also often as a hashtag. The World Health Organization, this is the report from 2022, says that 60% of all people worldwide have some sort of disabilities. And this is 1.3 billion people, or every sixth person, and this is quite a lot. So if you ever think, is accessibility even worth my time or money? I would say yes, it is. And I can share with you the Microsoft Inclusive Design, because there is a misconception that most people think, yeah, okay, there are only a few blind people out there, are only a few people in the wheelchair, so it's not that of an impact. But that's actually not true. And I think that the Microsoft Inclusive Design kit shows it very well, that the misconception of a disability that is a permanent situation is simply not true. It can also be temporary or situational. So in the spectrum, you can see that these are the four sensory categories, like touch, see, hear, and speak. And they are divided into permanent, temporary, and situational. And what does this mean? Let's say, for example, there is a person who has one arm or maybe no arm, and this person cannot use the mobile phone. But this is also the truth for someone who has an arm injury, has broken his arm, and this is only maybe for some days or weeks. But in this situation, the person also cannot use their mobile phone. And a situational example would be if you have your newborn baby in your arms, then you could also not use your phone, or you were shopping and have too much bought in the market and you cannot move your arms, for example, opening the door. So then an automatic door would help someone with no arms because they cannot open the door, but it would also help people who are in the real shop, for example, who have difficulties opening the door or reach the door. And as for my personal experience, I have example also for the third sensory category, that, for example, both of my parents-in-law are deaf, so they have to watch everything, every video or every movie with subtitles, and not only subtitles but also captions, and because otherwise they would not understand what the people are talking in the movie. And even though you maybe now think, yeah, okay, this because they are deaf, but I personally do not watch any videos, or no matter if it's YouTube or an Instagram reel, without subtitles anymore, because I am used to it. I also tend to watch these videos when I'm on the go or I'm on the train. I do not want to disturb people around me, of course, and I want to be able to watch the videos whenever I want, and not to be dependent on, can I turn on the sound? And after a while, I also realized that it helps me to comprehend what is said way better when I also read it while listening. So yes, as you can see, a disability does not mean a permanent situation, but it can also be temporary and situational. So it will always make sense to create your product and design and websites with accessibility in mind. we also have to understand that every person does interact with the content on the web differently. I personally, I'm a mouse user. I always use the mouse, but I met lots of people who never uses the mouse. They always use the keyboard, and it's not because they depend on it, because they have problems with their arms or anything, but they simply don't want to. And also, yes, as I mentioned, listening while I'm reading can be helpful, even though you maybe do not have any cognitive disabilities or something, or are not have hearing disabilities. So you should always have all these different types of interaction in mind when you create content and when you create a web app. So the next point we're going to talk about is, what is user experience? Well, when you're a designer, you may be thinking, okay, why is she explaining what is user experience? Because I know it. I'm a designer, and I'm sure you're doing the very best to create a really good and strong user experience for your customers out there. But I would suggest going a tiny step further on what user experience really means, because as designers, we're responsible for the overall experience, and this includes accessibility, or in another sense, when there is no accessibility and they cannot even use the product, then there is no experience at all. This is also what is said in the first accessibility principle by the W3C, so the Web Consortium, is that all users, regardless of a disability, must have equal access to the information. So the next time when you start a new product, think about who the users are and what they need and how they perceive the web and how they are going to use your applications and websites. And often this can be achieved way better when you are working with other people in a team. For example, I personally love working with teams. I think there is great value in the differences we find in people. And these differences also help us think more creatively and identify gaps in the products we develop, which we otherwise would not be, we would not see, because we think only about how I am perceiving the web. And I believe that we can do way better when we work in teams and create more adaptable and more durable and more innovative products if we take a closer look at these gaps and the insights we gain from other people and how they experience the web and how they are interacting with web applications, and see also the world a little bit differently than the majority. And applying accessibility from the very beginning. So applying accessible and inclusive design benefits everyone, as we could see from the previous examples, whether they are disabled or not. And in addition to our personal experience, we have also guidelines which can help us identify possible gaps, or help us realize and memorize what should we include when we create new designs or when we refactor old existing designs. You can do so by checking out the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. The short form is WCAG. I think the last updated version is 2.2. I often also see that people or companies use the 2.1, and we have the AA. So there are 3 stages: 1A, AA, and AAA. And what is also legally required is that we all meet at least the requirements for the AA. And in the guidelines, they explain in very, very detailed, I would not say they explain it very well, but very detailed and hard to understand, especially in the beginning, what you need to do to create accessible elements for the web, and how to create accessible mobile apps. Yeah, I mean, give them a try. But I think after a while you will get used to it and how to use it. But I also will suggest when we get in the next webinar about testing tools that there are different ways which will get you a lot farther by starting not that deep into the knowledge already, but slowly with automatic testing tools. For now, I wanted to point out that there are guidelines which you have to fulfill to create a product legally as accessible, and yeah, check them out. So this is a report which is done every year by WebAIM, and it shows the failures from the 1 million most used websites, and this is only the errors from the homepage and not the whole web app or website, which makes it even sadder, I would say, when we look at the errors out there. So the report is done every year, and what we can see that the most common accessibility issue is the low contrast, and this is something which happens already in the design process, or maybe it's also already a product owner who wants the specific color combination, but it's for us designers to suggest colors that are accessible, and this falls under our job description, and it seems that we are doing a bad job as UX designers with more than 80% of accessibility errors in low contrast. This is also something we will focus on. The first examples I'm going through today, the other ones are also design, but also development related. What is really our choice as designers is the low contrast. You can also learn about accessibility, for example, from the web.dev. It's from Google. The content is getting better. There are some issues with it, but I think as a starting point, and if you want to have a guided resource to get deeper into the topic from the beginning, and also from different perspectives, then you should at least check it out. So the very first key concept I want to go with you today is about the visuals, and it contains the color contrast, also color independency, and the typography. I'm sure that because I'm doing this as well, we as designers in the beginning, when we are going to decide what colors should I use, there are always the questions, do I like this color combination? And if I decide, oh yes, I really love it, then there's another question. Okay, will others like it as well? And does this color combination even reflect the brand or the content of my product I'm going to create? But besides of these questions, there are also other questions you should focus even more. This would be, can people read the text if I choose a certain color combination? Can people recognize the link inside a paragraph when maybe the difference between the colors is not, the contrast is not that high? And also, how are the colors in general perceived? For example, I'm working on a MacBook and I have a Retina display. So my colors, I see the colors always very rich and clear, but this does not mean that the person has the same setup as I do. So maybe they have an old laptop and do not perceive the colors as I do. These are things we should also consider besides the thing if we do like the color combination or not. And what also should be the very first point on this, because we saw all these errors, is that we should not start working with these colors, but we should decide forefront before starting a new project is this color combination, is the contrast high enough, and then choose it and go with it, instead of then refactoring it again when you realize, oh, the colors you have chosen are not accessible at all. So always do the check before you start implementing it. So for the color contrast, I have 2 examples saying the text, if it's perceivable. For you, it would say that there's a bad color contrast. It's a grayish forefront color against the white background color. And on the other side, there is this purple background color with the same grayish color as the forefront color. And I really hope this is an extreme example and that no one uses these kind of color contrast, because it's really bad. As you also can see that it fails very badly. It has 1.3 to 1. And the minimum contrast you need for at least fulfill the requirements is 4.5 to 1, which we perceive, which we get here. And so we are even over AAA. And I would also say, even so there are requirements that you only have to fulfill 4.5, I think it's a bad practice. If you only adjust the color that much that you reach, okay, now I'm 4.5, okay, now I go with this color, I encourage you to choose simply a way better contrast, starting with at least 7, to make it as accessible as possible from the very beginning. A few other examples I want to show you. It's not only text related, but also when we choose icons. So there is a check mark, and it has a light purple background, and the check mark itself is white. And it does fail the color contrast. And we could say, for example, if you want to adjust it to make the background darker, so we will fulfill the requirements. But sometimes this is not it's not possible. Yeah. So when we have, like in this example, we already have the dark purple background, but now the icon itself is black, or we have the lighter version and the icon itself is white. Maybe we are not always allowed to change the background color because these are the company colors, and we are not allowed to touch it. Then we can also change the foreground color. So it's always the foreground color with containing the information against the background color. And in the end, it doesn't matter which one you adjust. Just make sure that you are having enough contrast. And then it's way more perceivable. And there's also a different perspective on when you have links inside a paragraph. There's also the rule that a link inside a paragraph has to also fulfill some requirements. So in this case, the text link is only slightly lighter than the text itself. And it's not really possible to see that this would be a link you can click on. And now with not only is it purple and the contrast is high enough, I also added an underline, so it's really very clear that you now have a link inside a paragraph. And the rule for this element is that, so you have to look at 2 different things. The link text has to have a contrast against the body text. It has to be 3 to 1. And again, the link text has to have a contrast against the background, which is again 4.5 to 1. And you can check these things forefront with a color contrast checker. So there are many extensions out there, or software, and also in Figma there are plugins where you can check the color contrast when you're going to choose the colors. I always use the WebM color contrast checker. where you can, you put in the hex code for the foreground color and also for the background color. It immediately shows you if the contrast ratio is high enough, or in this case, the ratio itself. And I know it's high enough, even though you maybe not see that it's a green circle because of color blindness, but we know the rules that it's 4.5 at least. And it also shows in which combination it's going to work, that to fulfill WCAG AA, you pass with a normal text and with a large text as well. And the meaning behind normal text and large text is that maybe when you use a certain color combination, it maybe passes not the normal text, but normal text is more like the body text, but we also have headings. So it can be possible that when you use this color combination as a heading, then it will work and pass the WCAG. And the rule for this is that the text has to be at least 18.66 pixels and bold, or at least 24 pixels to fulfill the large text requirements. You can also use the ruler and adjust the color a bit to, then you can check if does the ratio now fit or not. And there's also a different contrast checker when you work with links. Then you can check the link color against the body text color, against the background color, and it will point out, in this case, for example, the blues are very similar. So the link to body text does fail WCAG, it does even fail 1A. But the link against the background would be enough, and also the body text against the background would be enough. These are very handy tools. I use them every time I'm going to choose colors. So the next concepts of the visuals, or the next example of the visual concept is color independency. And what does this even mean? So for something to be color dependent, it would mean that the information we get from the web is only conveyed through color. Let's say you are logged in an application and you see your your profile picture, and below the profile picture is a small circle which is green when you are online, and it turns, for example, red when you are offline. And this would mean that only the color differences shows the users if you are online or offline. And this is of course, this is not good, because people, for example, with color blindness would not see a difference, because for them everything is grayish or maybe brownish, depending on the on their color blindness. So we can improve this by adding additional meaning, for example, with adding an icon. Let's say when you're online, then the circle is green, but in addition, inside the circle is a little check mark. And when you're offline, then it is red and maybe an X. So even though the person maybe cannot perceive the colors, they can still see the icons and get that the person is now online or offline. Another example I want to share with you to get into more detail is the form field. Here we can see a form field showing that it wants a full name and the description of the full name, that the name of the insured person, for example. There is a grayish background and also a bigger, darker underline. And if the person who is filling out the form is now making a mistake and we want to show the error, when it's color dependent, it could be looking like this. Okay, in compared to the previous version, there's now the text and the full name, but actually this could also still be kind of a label for the field. It's red, and the underline now also turns red. But when we look at this in grayscale, then for me there's actually no difference. So I cannot see that now this changed from the dark black. I cannot remember the previous version already because it's updated. And yeah, as I mentioned, this could now also be, it could also mean that this is the label and not that there is an error. And we could update this with adding, for example, additional border on the left side, a big, thick border on the left side, and also an icon with an exclamation mark inside the form field. So I think it's now way clearer that that something is going on here and that the user should check again. And when we look at it in grayscale, we can also see the difference when we compare it to the previous version, that there is something going on here. These are sometimes, I think, simple steps we could do to make this component or this element way more accessible. Other example would be, for example, like a to-do list. We have 3 to-dos here, and the to-dos have different backgrounds, meaning that the pink one is to be done, and the purple one is already done, and the yellow one needs a review. But again, when we look at them, it's grayscale. I cannot see any difference which one is already done or which one needs review. And here we can also make use of icons additionally, or even not only icons, but maybe also icons and labels, and design the whole element differently, having the title of the to-do above, and then we have this icon which is different from the other icons, and also an additional label for the whole element which is different, instead of having the the label over there, what the description of what the meaning is over there. And these are also working when we look at them in grayscale. One of the success criterions in the WCAG guidelines is that color should, as mentioned, not be used as the only visual means to convey information, indicate an action, prompt a response, or identify a visual element. This is what I wanted to show you with these examples. So the last example of the visual concepts is typography. So that there are a few common fonts we can already use, which are considered as mostly accessible, like Open Sans, Roboto, Lato, Railway, Monstera. And I would say that we maybe just stick to them because they are already very well known and kind of approved. And in addition to the font itself, there are also other few things we have to keep in mind when we work with these fonts. So when you have text, to make them accessible is that you have the text should be at least 6 pixels for the body text, and that the line height, or also called line spacing, is at least 1.5 times the font size. The spacing following the paragraphs should be at least 2 times the font size. The letter spacing, also called tracking, is at least 0.12 times the font size. The word spacing is at least 0.16 times the font size. And also when the screen is very large, we should still make it shorter, the text to read, because after some time you will lose track on which line you are on. So we should do only 60 to 80 characters per line on a computer display. And a few examples when you choose fonts would be, the typeface, for example. This one is very fancy, and sure, many people can read it, but it makes it also difficult and complex to read it. Then there is a very good example when you choose a font. This is always what I check: if the uppercase I and the lowercase l and the number 1, does it look the same or not? So it's very important that you choose a font where these look different, and people who are reading your content can distinguish between these letters. Also, when the text is too narrow, it's maybe hard to read certain words. Like this one, it could be cool. It maybe could also mean cod. When too large sections, it's only bold text can also be difficult to read, or when everything is italicized, so the longer it gets, more difficult is to read. If it's a too small text, or when everything is in caption. And there are also some differences in type fonts when you have like the C and versus the O. So it's always better to choose a font where the ending is not that close to the other ending, so that the C is more open in this example, for example, to have the difference to the O. Also, the lower E versus the O. It's easier to read when the ending of the E is shorter. And who benefits from this visual concept? Many people. People with low vision, or who are colorblind, who have low contrast sensitivity, and also people with dyslexia. Fonts or typography is also important to structure the whole page. So it's important that you make it visible that this is a heading. That's why it's bold and it's larger than the body text. It helps better understand and also navigate a website. The usage of the typography also in its different stages of higher font size, and the bold versus the normal text weight. These are also things to consider when choosing a font. And the last concept I'm going to talk about today is about comprehension, about understanding what's going on the website. And this is shown by the example of descriptive links text. I'm sure you often see when you reading blog posts, navigating the web, that we have these kind of introduction or a small summary or the first few sentences of a blog post. And if you are interested in read the whole blog post, then you can click the read more button or the click here button to get more information. And maybe this seems very clear to many of us in the beginning, but it can be very confusing for people, for example, with cognitive disabilities, and also for screen reader users. What could we use instead of the read more link or the click here link? We could make, for example, the heading as the link text itself. So when I navigate here, I would say that time management is, the whole blog is about time management. So it makes sense for me that time management is also the heading when I navigate to it, and is also automatically therefore the link text. And why is it important, especially for screen reader users? We have to think about how do blind people, and not only blind people, but people who are using screen readers or who rely on screen readers, navigate the web a little bit different. So a screen reader is reading the content which is visible for others. It's reading out the content for which cannot see what's going on the web. And there is a shortcut where it can put out all the links on the page the user is currently on. And when we only have links saying read more, then there is no difference for the screen reader users which article they are currently on and which article they are going to read more about. If we're using the title of the blog instead of the read more as the link, then it's very clear for the screen reader user that these links are about so the blog post will be about time management or project management or risk management. They can now differ between all the links on the page and will know what they're going to read about. So as a closing summary for UX designers today is that accessibility is, we had the introduction about usability for people of all abilities. that there are a variety of disabilities and that they can be permanent, temporary, or situational, and that we can, not only from our own experience, but we also have guidelines we can follow, which help us create more accessible content. And we also talked about the concepts like color contrast for low vision, for example, have a minimum contrast from 4.5 to 1 text on background. And for graphics, it's 3 to 1. Use color contrast checker always before you use them in your project. The second concept was color independence for color blindness and cognitive disabilities. Don't rely on color alone to convey meaning. Always use icons in addition or labels to better understand it. And when it comes to typography, use common fonts like Arial, Open Sans, Roboto, and also test them for a few things I showed you in the examples, like the upper I versus the lower L versus the number 1, and make sure that the text size is at least 16 pixels and we have a line height 1.5 times the text. And the last one is use descriptive links. The screen reader, it's good for screen reader user, for cognitive disabilities, and also in general for usability. Avoid these read more and click here links, and make use of the descriptive title already, and to make it easier for people to navigate via links. And always check for colors as designing and not afterwards. So for the next session, it will be in February 27th. There's already the link. You can register for it. It looks in the web like this. There's also session info some material. You will find everything again on the GDG Vienna community, also on my personal website under the webinar series tab, and also the accessibility news newsletter. Subscribe to it, and then you will be always up to date with when the next event will happen. And now I am ready for the Q&A. You can, maybe you already wrote something in the Q&A session. I will check it now. And of course, there are lots of free resources, and you can find every material on the website, on my drive, or text me if you cannot find anything I thought I was sharing with you today. But yes, to the Q&A, I will stop sharing my screen to be able to see the questions if there are any. And I'm still sorry if you cannot see me. I hope the next time I will be able to make this work. So there's one question here. It is, what do you need to consider to create inclusive UX writing on websites and apps? And how do you address people with disabilities in a sensitive way? For example, when it comes to settings in relations to their impairment. In case you cannot find the Q&A session, it's on my side, it's below my screen where I think I'm sharing myself. This is the first point on my side, Q&A. So thanks for this question. Also, there will be a session about going more into detail with all the disability problems we have to, especially what you asked here, how to address it, how to get sensitive to the topic. And I will invite a guest who is a UX researcher and who will go into way more detail that I can do. So looking forward to this session already. To address people with disabilities, it always, like, in the end, I would say you have to ask them personally how they want to be addressed. Everyone is different. There are people with disabilities who identify themselves with the disability, saying like, I'm Julia, I'm blind. Some people do not want to talk about their disability that much, so they maybe would skip the part. There's also, so it's always best, therefore, to ask them personally, what do you prefer? How should I address you? If you are uncertain. In general, there's also the rule, and this is a rule different in countries. In Austria here, we would say, we always have the person first approach, saying the person with a disability, while other countries saying the disabled person. Yeah, so I want to point out that there's no one way to do it, and one way to do it right. It always depends on the person themselves, and it's always best to ask them how they would prefer it. There's also this misconception that you cannot say the word disabled, and maybe it's better to use handicap or something like this. So this is simply not true. It's just the person is simply disabled. This is just how it is. We do not have to use any. For us, maybe it seems like it's a nicer way of saying it, but it's just what it is. So you are allowed to say the person with a disability. And yeah, and we should also try to understand from their perspective and start avoiding things like, yeah, this poor person, he's bound on the wheelchair, which is not true, because people who are relying on the wheelchair are happy to have the wheelchair, where otherwise they could not go outside, they could not move from A to B. This is something we really should get used to, it, that it's not a bad thing. And I personally suggest that on Instagram, there are many, maybe TikTok, but I'm only on Instagram. There are many people with disabilities who showing their day-to-day life, and to show their the problems they face with the society, or also with the surroundings, the buildings and all the stuff. And they explain it in sometimes very funny way, and also in a very instructional way, how you can approach this in a sensitive way. So I encourage you to look out for these people and to follow them and get used to their daily lives, and that it's not that what we think that I cannot say this or that, to get a more inclusive way of thinking about people with disabilities. For the next question is, what accessibility plugins do you recommend for Figma? I shared them also in my resources. The few I can currently think of in the moment is, lately there are these annotations. I really recommend them to use it. I think it's from CVS. But as I said, I always also will share them in my resources, because you have a great, I think the annotations is a very good approach when you're starting out with accessibility, to use them in your design, and that you realize, do you really understand your design? So because of the annotations, there is like structure. They help you structure your website, like in the landmarks and in the headings and in the interaction elements. And when you're already now thinking, okay, what are landmarks? This is where you start, yeah? Learn about landmarks, learn about all the different things. You maybe think it's clear for you as a designer that, yeah, I know what I was thinking when I created the design, and now the developer will get what you thought, but this is not the case. I can tell you for sure. The better you understand the design and also can describe your design, like, hey, I want, when you develop my design, I want you that the user flow is like from the starting point, and you tap through the website, that then this is the element that follows next, and this is the element that follows next, and this is this is inside the landmark, like the header, and this is inside the landmark called main, and this is all inside the footer, because these are the things you should consider when creating a design. But this does not mean that the developer also understand it like this. Maybe they think, okay, this component or this element is way easier when I write it like this and not inside the landmark. But there are rules, and also, yeah, we get into code quality later on in the webinar series. The better you already describe your design, also in written form, the better it is for the whole development process, and that everyone in the team understands what's going on the design. And yes, of course, the slides will be shared with you. You can go to the GDG website where you logged in. But for the slides directly, it's best to go to my blog site, accessibilityfirst.at, where I share the recording and also the slides and information on the next sessions. And another great question is about links. I've heard it's more accessible if you don't open external links in a new tab. Is this true? Or how you should address opening links inside with the code? It's a very good question. And yes, this is true. As far as I know from research, that people using screen reader are clicking on a link, thinking that the page will reload to the link and not that a tab will not an external tab will open. And this is especially true for links that are related to the website. So there are sometimes links when you really link to something, so a third party website maybe, then this could be that they are thinking that it's an external link. But to make this clear, this is something written in the code. It's visually hidden, so only screen reader will hear this, that you say this link opens in a new tab. If it's important for you as a developer or as a team that the link does not open in the same tab but in a new tab, then you should make it clear that this will happen when the user clicks on it by using this visually hidden approach, writing it as a text form. But of course, also people who do not use a screen reader maybe want to know, does this open in a new tab or on the page you're currently on? And I think the common use case is that you use the icon, the specific icon, which is a square, and the arrow on the right side, which would mean that it will open in a new tab. But yes, research says that people are thinking that it will open in the same tab. This is what they are expecting the link to do. Yes, so it's 6 p.m. We would be finished with today's session. If there are additional questions, please, you can always text me or keep it for the next session, because as I said, I want every Q&A session to be open for every question, and that does not have to be related to the topic for the specific session. And we also will have the Ask Me Anything special session where you can really ask anything about accessibility, I would say in the first half of the year. Otherwise, thank you for joining. Thank you for the questions. Yeah, see you next time. And yes, have a nice evening. Thank you.